G'day guys, this is Amiga. So the gay plebiscite postal votes are going out, and I just wanted to voice my opinion on this matter, which I will be voting no for. And I think to anyone who has looked around the world, to anyone that's actually looked at this in any depth, you know, it's the obvious answer. And you know, the yes side has used, you know, some sort of emotional sort of you know, ploy to try and drag people in to vote for this. But there's a few points I want to make. The first point is that the parties that actually want to vote this in are socialist parties. I mean, we have to recognise that. We have to recognise their agenda. We have to recognise the damage that they're doing all over the world. We have to recognise what's taking place in countries which have accepted socialism. And we have to recognise that, you know, when we bring in an ideology like this, and we all know the truth, we've all seen just how intolerant this ideology is, that does not allow any adversaries, whether that's in the, you know, in the public space, in the workplace, and it'll move into education. But for me, it's the handing over of freedom from us and giving it to the state. That's essentially what people are going to do here. If they vote yes, they're handing over their freedoms and giving them to the state, because, you know, the state will be able to legislate laws which basically, you know, force parents to allow the LGBTI orthodoxy to be taught to their children in schools. And that's indicative of socialist and communist totalitarian ideologies. They start with the children, and they indoctrinate the children. Now you think about this: if you're a socialist party in the country and you could get rid of all your opposition, if you could turn your opposition's policies in a parliament or a senate or whatever into a hate speech crime, into a hate crime, why wouldn't you? And in one foul swoop, you've given the socialist parties a massive monopoly over politics in the country. And in a generation, if the children are taught socialism and indoctrinated, and I think I had that interview with Hale, and he showed me a 180-page PDF which includes entire areas of social engineering of children to vote for socialism. You know, in a couple of generations, there's a complete monopoly. And where does that leave us? Where does that leave us as a country when the state has so much power? It can define what is and is not hate speech. And we've seen this, you know, this slippery slope over in Canada, where, you know, it was same-sex marriage, and then it morphed into, you know, gender fluidity and talking about gender fluidity, and then it morphed into talking about immigration. And you've got this state now that has so much power. It can legislate what can be said and what can't be said, what can be thought and what can't be thought. And so, and we've seen this in Germany. We saw Merkel having 36 houses raided, you know, because of Facebook posts. So people are posting stuff on Facebook, and 36 houses were raided. And out of those 36 houses that were raided, I think one was an LGBTI issue. So somebody on Facebook posted something about the LGBTI on Facebook in Germany, and it resulted in a riot squad, or, you know, a SWAT squad kicking in the front door and raiding this person's house. There were 2 or 3 which were far left, and I think the other, you know, like 32 or whatever, were far right, or deemed far right by the German government and, deemed far right is disagreeing with the government agenda. That is where socialism leads. Now, you have to ask yourself, since when did politicians ever, since when were they ever motivated, by the plight of the people of the country? Politicians are not motivated by the plights of the downtrodden. They're not motivated by the plight of the LGBTI. They are motivated by power. That's what politicians do, and it's really not even surprising to me that Australian politicians want to bring this in. We've got the Guard there. We've got the Conservatives that recognise exactly what this ideology is and recognise the massive implications it's going to have on free speech, and they're trying to stop this coming in. But make no mistake that this is the beginning of a totalitarian ideology, and all across the world. I mean, out of the 27 countries that have it, I think only 2 of them went to a vote, and the rest it was pushed through the High Court. And you look at America, which this is getting to one of my other points. You look at America, it was pushed through the High Court by Obama, and the only thing that has saved America, love him or hate him, is Donald Trump. Donald Trump came in and he was pushing back against the socialist agenda. Now, this is a global agenda. This is a global agenda, and this is why Germany, for example, has, said that America is no friend of ours anymore, because Germany is a part of this global agenda to implement this socialist ideology, to bring in these hate speech laws all across the world. You look at the European Union. The European Union has already drafted hate speech laws where same-sex marriage was the beginning of all that. Same-sex marriage was the beachfront to institute this stuff into societies. Now, I mentioned Donald Trump, and this is one of my other major concerns, and that is people will not be changed. You cannot legislate to change people. You just can't. Totalitarian, political movements have a few different outcomes, and more often than not, those outcomes are conflict, they're war, from people pushing back, or to sort of stop that from happening, the government has to brutally enforce it. These are the sort of outcomes. Now, you're not going to change people. You're not going to change people's minds. You're not going to change a Muslim's mind and tell him that now that they've legislated marriage equality, that he has to agree with gay marriage. It's just never going to happen. They've got this, idea of this utopian sort of end game. But what it actually leads to is conflict, because unless you have a fair political system, it's just not going to work. So what we're going to see is, if this goes through and we see if this goes through, sorry, I might have had a breaking connection there. If this goes through and we have the rise of the far left, the reaction will be a massive rise in the far right. That is all that is going to happen. The country will be divided into deeper sort of sections. Conflict will go on the rise. Radicalism will spread. And you'll see much like what you're seeing in European countries. You've got the rise of far-right groups, in Britain and Sweden and all over the place. Then you've got the rise of far-left groups, radical Islam increases. Everything gets worse because you've created a political system which takes away people's freedom. It takes away the right of individuals to believe and think what they want, and people won't cop that. You know, they just won't cop that, and there is no amount of policing that the government can bring in. Not unless not unless you want to go the full bottle. Not unless you want to go Stalin on everyone, and that's what I'm saying. Unless you want to go Stalin on everyone, you're not going to be able to enforce this stuff. And the question is, just how far are we willing to go? What are we going to see in a few years? Canada, if you speak against the gender fluid, progressive idea of, of the government, now they're talking about taking people's children away. They've even legislated law to remove kids from homes. So that's just how far this stuff goes. I think too that replacing the gender roles of men and women in society, it's going to damage society in a way that we're not going to see for a lot of years. And I actually watched a great video by PragerU the other day talking about, for example, young men who don't have dads. Now, I grew up without a dad, and children are 20 times more likely to be put in jail without a father. That's just, it doesn't matter how people feel about that, that's just the truth. Massively higher rate of suicide, massively higher rate of drug addiction. When you take away those roles for those children in society. And for me, as a father, I'm facing, if this goes through, I'm facing my children being indoctrinated with Marxist ideology in school, being put through a social engineering, and conditioning sexual education platform so that these socialist parties have a monopoly in the future, and that's exactly what they're doing. I don't know. I saw a 180-page PDF from Arizona for the 6th grade, and it was just disgraceful. And whole sections on Marxism, entire sections on Marxism, and it's really scary. It's really quite scary, and it's a global phenomenon. And it just frustrates me to no end that people just can't see that all across the globe, where this stuff is being implemented, and it's being implemented to break down Judeo-Christian societies for a takeover. And people are just too dumb to see it. They are just literally too stupid to see that this is a takeover. The European Union, the breaking down of freedom of speech, the bringing in of mass immigration to water down, all of the traditions that make societies strong and cohesive for a takeover. And it's all about the money. And they've very cleverly designed this entire thing, and people have just taken it hook, line and sinker. And here's a sad thing. I actually thought that people might actually be smart enough to see this stuff, but they are just so stupid. People are just so dumb. They can just be so easily manipulated by these, socialist cronies. And the globalists are just moving right in. I tell you what, when Trump is gone in the US and they get a socialist president in there, you're going to see this stuff in full flight. And even today we saw Gab AI, which is a free speech platform, get removed off the Google Play Store. Apple wouldn't put it on, and Google have removed that. The Google, Apple and all the major software companies have already signed agreements with the EU to enforce their new hate speech laws, and the EU hate speech laws in the fine print basically can be defined as anything that they define as hate speech. And it's complete totalitarianism. And Australia, vote no to this stuff coming into our country. And we've already seen a rise of all these minority groups right across the country asking for this and that. They're tearing down the statues and blah, blah, blah. And this stuff is not even here yet. We're seeing Bill Shorten already talking about a $1.4 million grant for a LGBTI watchdog. And this is before it's even gone through. And it's not going to be an LGBTI watchdog. It's going to be a government group that are going to make sure that children, businesses and people are being indoctrinated with socialist ideology. That's what they're doing. That's what that's all about. But people just can't see the bigger picture. They just can't see that that's about. Guys, I'm just going to sign off. I keep losing connection here. Thanks for listening. Look, vote no. Oh, one more thing. I've got to show you this. This is the LGBTI mission statement. Let me just open up my iPad. Just opening that up. Okay. Here is the LGBTI mission statement for Victoria. To change society to achieve equality, human rights and social justice for lesbian, gay, queer, bisexual and same-sex attracted Victorians. By society, we mean every facet of our society, including not only the laws, regulations, local laws, and by laws effective in every part of Victoria, and the policies and the actions of every level of government affecting Victoria, but also the relationship within and between every neighbourhood and institution of society. Now tell me, what does that sound like? You can find that if you go to the LGBTI Lobby of Victoria and type in /mission. You have to, they've sort of hidden it in their website, but you can find it in their website, and it's very, very clear. That is more than just marriage, isn't it? That is more than just, looking out for the downtrodden. And that is more than just trying to help, poor victimised gays get marriage. That is a far left Marxist socialist agenda. And that's exactly what they intend to do. And unless we vote this down, our children in years to come are going to be paying the price for this stuff. So guys, yeah, again, vote no, no, no. And I'll be back soon with another video. Cheers.